Do not change the station. What you're hearing is coming from the Big Sci-Fi Podcast and the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. Stay tuned for the next exciting episode of... Wait a minute. Receiving a new transmission. What is that? What am I seeing? It's big. It's really big. Oh my God, it's so... Welcome to Season 6 of the Big Sci-Fi Podcast, the biggest sci-fi podcast in the galaxy. Join our crew, Adina, Brian, Chris, and Steve, as we travel the Milky Way looking for the best that science fiction has to offer. Make sure you're strapped in tight, because we're going to have a lot of fun talking all things sci-fi. Stay tuned to this channel for the next audio transmission.
English is a funny language. A word written one way can have more than one meaning. Take the word commitment. If you look up the definition, you'll find it as feeling dedication and loyalty to a cause, activity, or job, wholeheartedly dedicated. Yes, it can be used that way, but it can also be used in another sentence, such as, he was so crazy, he had to be committed. For today's guest of the Big Sci-Fi Podcast, he fits the first usage of the word committed. Hello, listeners of the Big Sci-Fi Podcast. We have a very special guest tonight. His name is Tom Salinsky. Is that the correct pronunciation, Tom? Thank you.
Perfectly correct.
And he is the author of an upcoming book, Star Trek: Discovering the TV Series, a subject we seem to like. For those of you looking to purchase this book, you'll have to wait a little while. It will not be available in the USA until June the 13th, available from Amazon, but place your orders now if you don't mind. However, if you lived where Tom lives and he is there for this interview, thank you, Zoom, you can buy this book by the time this interview is released. So to our UK fans, go get it now. Like our interview with Jamie Anderson, son of Jerry Anderson, creator of Thunderbirds, we are working in 3 separate time zones today. Pacific, where I am, Eastern, where Adina is, and Greenwich Mean Time in London, which is where Tom is right now. It's after 11 p.m. Thank you for staying up. We hope you don't mess up your ability to watch whatever favorite late night show you might want to watch.
Not at all.
So without further ado, Tom, would you please say hello to our listeners?
Hello, listeners. Yes, my name's Tom Salinsky, and I spent 2 years watching an episode of Star Trek every single day.
And that's where we get into the conversation of the word commitment.
That's a good use of time. That's a good use of time.
Mm-hmm. Normally, we'd have 4 of the members of the Big Sci-Fi Podcast on the show tonight. First, Adina. Say hello.
Hi, everybody.
Next would have been Brian, but he had a family event coming up, and he's being a good dad because of that. Chris, prior engagement, because his engagement is going to become marriage by the time this is released. And myself, Steve Merkin, I'm here out in California. So without any further statements or requirements, in the words of the great comedian Jackie Gleason, and away we go. And let's start off with we'll flip over the cards and let's get to the first question, kids. Tell the audience, Tom, what your book is all about.
So a while ago, it occurred to me to wonder how well I knew Star Trek. I know a fair bit about a fair few things. I've always been a huge Doctor Who fan. And I'd recently completed a podcast project where with 2 friends, we had watched every movie that had won Best Picture at the Academy Awards in an order determined by pulling them out of a hat at random, just to keep it interesting. So you can see I like.
For what year span was that? What year span?
For all the years. So we did that for 93 movies.
Wow. Okay.
And in each case, we'd research the movie, we'd watch the movie, and then at the end of each episode, we would try and answer the question: did the Academy get it right? Or was there a movie that, had we been asked, we would have voted for that was also released that year?
Interesting.
Then what was the answer? Kind of percentage-wise?
I think all 3 of us only voted with the Academy about a fifth of the time, but about a third to half the time, at least one of us would say the Academy got it right. Yeah, there are some very strong movies in that list. There are a few duds. I'll be very happy if I never have to see Around the World in 80 Days ever again. That is a disaster of a film. It really is. But there's some classics I had no idea even existed, like A Man for All Seasons, which is the most incredible film. Or what's that film from about the? Oh God, I can't even remember the name of it now because it's 11 p.m. here. The serviceman returning home after the war. Won Best Picture in 1946, and it's called Best Years of Our Lives.
Yes, exactly.
That's an extraordinary film, which I'd never seen before, and it absolutely broke all of our hearts.
Yes. Considering the actual star of the film was a veteran of World War II.
That's right. Yeah, and if you want a funny Oscar story, Harold Russell had lost both his hands in a munitions accident. So he wasn't a trained actor, but he was ideal for this part of this movie. And lo and behold, he was nominated as Best Supporting Actor. But the Academy realized, well, he's not actually going to win. And that would kind of, that would be a bit of a downer. So we'll vote him an honorary award and he can have that and that'll be fine. So he got his honorary award. But then when the envelope was opened for Best Supporting Actor, he had in fact won. So he is the only person ever to win 2 Academy Awards for one performance.
Very interesting.
So yes, we completed this project, and then I was sort of thinking about various things and thinking about Star Trek, and my knowledge of Star Trek is kind of scanty and spotty. I watched the movies when they were coming out. I went to some lengths to watch The Next Generation, including going to my local video shop to rent episodes on VHS because that was the only way I could get them. And then about 10 years ago, I did buy the whole series on Blu-ray when it was re-released. So that was this kind of the instance of the show I knew the best. And I'd watched bits of some of the later shows, but it always seemed to be on at strange times or channels I didn't get. After about 3 or 4 years of Next Generation being on BBC Two, which everyone could get, Rupert Murdoch's Sky TV bought Next Generation. And that meant you could only watch it if you had a satellite dish, which about 20% of UK homes did. So it was a marketing ploy. It was a reason to get a satellite dish, but it meant that I couldn't watch it anymore after that. So I thought, how long would it take to get caught up? And it turns out, after a little bit of spreadsheeting, what I realized was if I started watching the original series on the 1st of January 2022, then I would finish watching Enterprise on Christmas Day 2023. And that just seemed too neat not to do. So that project became a blog, and now the blog has become a book, or as originally planned, 2 books, and now it looks like almost certainly 3 books.
And the first book is covering the original series, the animated series, and the Next Generation series. And is it also including the films of the Next Generation series as well?
No, it includes the original series films. It doesn't include the Next Generation films for the reason that including the Next Generation films would have meant that the book ended on Star Trek Nemesis.
You don't want to end there.
You don't want to end there. That's why bring everybody down. So instead, we get to end on All Good Things, which is a much nicer way to round off the book.
Okay.
Nemesis is going to be buried somewhere in the middle of book 3, I think.
After mention, yeah. Well,
Yes.
we had an episode where we talked about the 13 Star Trek films, and we put them in order. And I can't remember, but I think we had a little fun moving between Nemesis and what was the other one, Adina, that we put it very low? That was
Star Trek
one
5?
before that.
Was it Insurrection?
No.
I think
Insurrection. Yes.
Insurrection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where I think I said that. I don't remember being an insurrection in the film, but I definitely remember there being a nemesis in Nemesis. So yeah,
Yes.
Yeah. But so what did you do? Did you purchase the Blu-rays or DVDs and watch it that way?
I like having copies of things. I didn't want to be beholden to any particular streaming service and its whims and vagaries. And getting all of the box sets meant that I also had access to commentaries and trivia tracks and behind the scenes documentaries and so on. All of that was very useful for adding extra context. So yes, I watched everything on official DVDs and Blu-rays. It's a crying shame that you can't get good HD versions of Deep Space Nine and Voyager, but people didn't buy enough copies of the Next Generation Blu-rays, and the work needed to remaster Voyager and Deep Space Nine would have been much more intensive. So fans, blame yourselves.
Oh, I was going to say, I just really want to jump in because I'm I'm an engineer, which means I love data and spreadsheets and playing with numbers. So one of the things that I noticed that you did, so you gave each episode a rating of 1 to 5 stars, and I'm pleased to see that you did a reasonable explanation, of what you meant by if you were giving it a 1 versus a 2, 3, 4, and 5, which I like, because that's the hardest thing to do, right? Is to figure out your consistent scale and then stick to it. But so in my enjoyment of playing with numbers, I saw that most seasons of most of the shows, you at the end averaged it yourself, like what that season's like average rating was, and whether it was like up or down, like prior to the next. So I looked at all of that, and I also then wanted to look at, well, out of a series, like out of the original series, how many episodes did you give a 1-star rating versus 5-star rating? Versus 2, 3, 4.
I can bring the spreadsheet up. Hang on.
It was like you've done this. I kind of figured you might have done something like this too.
I don't think I have. I mean, I probably could. Because you're right, the average doesn't tell the whole story, and a series which is trundling along with lots of 2.5s and 3.5s is going to look the same as one with soaring highs and vertiginous lows. But I think there's a pretty widespread in all of them. I think every single season pretty much has got a few 1s and a few 5s.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and it's interesting because there is a clear bell curve to it.
Yeah. But it's probably a normal distribution.
Yeah. Yes. Where the majority of
this is just
the episodes
engineer talk now, Steve. I'm not an engineer either, but I do have a master's degree.
I'm sitting back enjoying the conversation.
But one of the things I noticed is, what I gather from that, because when we look at numbers and we look at statistics, we like to draw conclusions. And so my conclusions are, 1, you really didn't like the animated series. Is that true? Is that true? I've seen a couple episodes recently, but that's the other thing is kind of, I'm wondering, do you think you were not a fan because of the time, like you're seeing it now versus had you seen it like in the 70s where the style was a more, normal for the time? I wonder how much of that could be part of it.
I think it would always have looked a bit cheap. And I think there is a definite lack of ambition on display in at least half the episodes. I think what I can't factor in is the fact that when that series came out, there'd been no new Star Trek for like 6 years. And so fans would have been just desperate to get their hands on anything at all. And that's bound to change the way you experience it, I think. But I can't quite think myself back into that situation. I just have to play the ball as it lies.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, as a person who was there when it happened, because I've watched Star Trek, as I've said too many times, from September the 8th, 1966 and onward. When Star Trek was canceled, I was, hurt because I loved it. I love science fiction as a kid growing up in the 60s. And all of a sudden there was really great science fiction. It just wasn't the Robinson family trundling through space, not knowing where they're going, or, Admiral Nelson turning into a werewolf on Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. We had really important stories. So when it was gone, it was terrible. And then when they announced that they were having an animated series, I went, oh, this is great. Saturday morning cartoon's going to be so wonderful to watch. And it was the same thing. I felt like this isn't the Star Trek that I watched. It was cheap animation or quickie work animation and rehashing some old stories. And some characters weren't brought over and some were brand new. And it wasn't, I never really was fond of it watching it when it was originated. So I can understand.
You guys know the story about the cast, don't you?
Please share us. Go ahead.
With the voice and Nimoy.
So they signed up William Shatner, DeForest Kelley, Leonard Nimoy, And then they signed up Majel Barrett and James Doohan. And they sort of assumed that Majel Barrett and James Doohan could then do all the other voices, being quite versatile. And it was Leonard Nimoy who pointed out that what they had essentially done was hired all the white actors. And he said he wasn't going to do it at all unless they also hired George Takei and Nichelle Nichols. So that left out poor old Walter Koenig, last in, first out. But he did manage to get Nichelle and George on as rightly they should have been. And Walter Koenig did write a half decent episode for the show called The Infinite Vulcan, which is one of the better ones. It's one of the sillier ones, but it's one of the ones that tells a proper adventure story and makes use of the animated medium. You couldn't have done that story on the 1960s show's budget, but you could do it in animation almost as cheaply as you could do a show. And there is such a show where the crew just sit around playing practical jokes on each other for 20 minutes, which is not one of the franchise's high watermarks.
No.
You need to go back and rewatch the animated. It's been a while.
It's not essential.
Okay, fair.
Yeah. Well,
I did, of course.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did,
Adina.
of course, look at which one from the next generation and from the original series, which ones you did rate a 1-star versus a 5-star. And I have to say, I think I generally agree with your ratings. But I think most people, especially the 5 stars, I feel like those are the lists of those are the episodes that do, come to the top of people's lists. And so that was nice to see, that there is some commonality in thinking between us fans.
Yeah, and I tried to be aware, at least after the fact. I tried not to read too much before I watched a new episode, but I tried to be aware, at least after the fact, if I was saying something wildly counter consensus. A lot of people are very down on Turnabout Intruder, for example, which I thought was fine. It's silly, but it's no sillier than quite a lot of other Star Trek episodes. And the business about, what was her name? Janice, I think, saying this world of starship captains has no place for women, has been interpreted as meaning Starfleet doesn't have any women captains. When it's true, you don't see any in the original series. But I think you could also interpret it as you are in love with your job. And also, apart from anything else, she is the bad guy. So I don't think we're necessarily supposed to take what she says as life lessons that we should all live by. So I thought Turnabout Intruder was fine. It's not a finale in any sense of the word, but it's fine. But there are people who hate that episode.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in the original series that I passionately hate. There are episodes
for one.
No,
Spock's brain, even Spock's brain.
No. There's a difference between.
There are people who think that Spock's brain is this sort of camp classic masterpiece, which I think is being incredibly generous, because I really don't think that's what they were going for.
Yeah. So I don't passionately hate it. It's not my favorite episode. It's not one that I seek out to rewatch, but I also don't hate it. And when I was on the Star Trek cruise recently, the folks, the celebrities who were there on the boat, one evening, they did a recreation of Spock's brain, which was fantastically
that sounds hilarious. Yeah.
It was. And if that episode existed only to a million years in the future, have this basically comedy version of it, then it was well worth it.
But then also there's a show in the original series, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, which some people think is marvelous. It's the one with Frank Gorshin and the black and white people,
right? And
there are some people go, it's a parable about racism. It's so incredible. But everything that isn't a parable about racism in that episode is very, very stupid. And the stuff that is a parable about racism is sending the message that black and white people were equally to blame for slavery. And I'm not sure that's a message I can 100% get behind.
I don't know if that's the message that I picked up or is generally picked up. Now I want to go rewatch that.
Yeah, go back and watch it. It's because the two races are indistinguishable. Because you can't remember who's supposed to have black on which side. It's very it's the hate that's the problem, and they destroyed each other when they go back to the planet, there's nobody left because they destroyed each other. But that's not what
Right.
racism is. Racism is a dominant force in society subjugating another group of people for their own ends.
Well, then maybe that's it. Maybe the episode really was never about racism, but about just hate.
Yeah, which is
Right,
fair
right.
enough, but it still doesn't change the fact that, as I said, everything else of the episode is incredibly dumb.
Okay. Well, I think that anything about that aspect overshadows anything else in the episode. So yeah, see, now I'm going to go rewatch that too.
Yes, and of course, you might come to a completely different conclusion, and that's all part of the fun. Yeah, I did not write this book with the idea that this would be some final definitive statement about the merit of these episodes. It's just things I thought as I was watching them. And that's why there are also a few essays from other people in there, sometimes backing up what I've said and sometimes contradicting me, because we're all free to enjoy the show in our own way.
That is correct. And that's the beauty of it, is we all enjoy it in our own specific way. And some people may look at the original series as being, as you said, campy, silly, cardboard sets with gumball lights and things like that. But it still was, for 1966, 67 to 68. It was groundbreaking television.
And you should see what 1968 Doctor Who looks like by comparison. Where they sometimes spend upwards of £3,000 on an episode.
See, I guess I don't have a feel for that. Like, what was £3,000?
Well, I think an episode of Star Trek cost about $100,000 in the 1960s.
$100,000 to $200,000 range.
Yeah. And so you figure £3,000. It's what about $4,500 US, maybe or so. Yeah,
and that would have been an expensive episode.
Well, and that comes maybe to some other questions, which is, what was the first science fiction that got you interested? What was the first that you watched? Was it Doctor Who on television? Was it the movies? What was it? Or was it anything else besides that?
Yeah, I started getting science fiction by reading books. I was reading Robert Heinlein and Isaac Asimov and Nicholas Fisk is rather a forgotten British children's science fiction author who wrote some incredible stories. And that led me to Doctor Who and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And that led me to kind of everything else. And I think I saw the motion picture at the cinema when it first came out. And then my memories of Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock are, again, it's the novelizations more than anything else. I'm sure I did see them at the cinema around the time when they first came out, or when they were first on TV a year or two later. But I read and reread those novelizations. And then I think Star Trek V is the first one where I was old enough to take myself to go and see it at the cinema. And that was somewhat of a disappointment.
Don't if you ask William Shatner what's the best Star Trek movie of all time, it's Star Trek V, because he directed it. So
of course it is. Yes,
it's all a matter. But it's interesting because a number of the people who we've interviewed who have were involved in Star Trek, one or the other, a lot of them, the very first movie they ever saw was Wrath of Khan, and they even saw that before they ever saw the original Space Seed episode. So that was their introduction to Star Trek, is that particular film.
Yeah, I'd never seen Space Seed when I saw Wrath of Khan for the first time.
Yeah, so it's like you're picking up the story after it's already happened, but it's done so well that you can actually watch it and get the whole gist of what's going on, because it is explained through the dialogue and the action what preceded it, and you can understand that. But for me, like for Doctor Who, as you mentioned that, to me, the first time I saw Doctor Who was Peter Cushing in 1960s. And I saw that on television, Invasion Earth 2050 or something like that.
One, yeah,
Doctor Who and the Daleks. And to me, that's Doctor Who. So when, watching all the newer series, it's like, no, that's not Doctor Who. It's Peter Cushing. That's who Doctor Who is, So it's all a matter of perception as to what, your first introduction is to something unique. And I think we now have a new Disney Plus Doctor Who that's on now.
That's right. Yes. Well, it's the same old Doctor Who, but Disney Plus is putting some money in, and in exchange they get worldwide distribution.
More than £3,000 per episode.
Yes, I would have thought a little bit more. Yeah.
Adina, any question you have for Tom?
Well, so what's interesting is, because again, it's one of those things like I want to, not pick on, but again, in the whole, there are some shows you rate like a 4 that I'm like, for me is an absolute 5, and some that you had like a 5. I'm like, maybe, I don't know, and it's
To
hard
quote
not
Tom Lehrer,
to
or
want
to misquote Tom Lehrer, these are my opinions, and if you don't like them, I have others.
right. But then
Did you
that's the thing,
just
like,
say? Did you just say Tom Lehrer, the comedian?
Yes, yeah.
Good for
Huge
you.
Huge fan of Tom Lehrer.
Oh my goodness.
Amazing man.
I love it. And the Protestants hate the Catholics, and the Catholics hate the Protestants, and the Hindus hate it. Everyone hates the Jews.
Yes.
Tom Lehrer, political science. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
But I think like if I rank these, and I kind of now wish I had done that in prep for this and compared my percentages to yours. I think my bell curve would have skewed more to like over a 4 in general than over, you're clearly over a 3. I would have done more of a 4 because I mean there are a few episodes that I'm like, wow, why didn't he give this a 5?
I guess when I was watching, I imagine every episode starts at a 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, for every good thing it does, it creeps up, and for every bad thing it does, it creeps down. And I kind of end up trying to figure out where to place it. And sometimes something will happen right at the very end, and an episode I wasn't really feeling, and then something will happen at the end, like, oh, that's worth an extra star, that's worth an extra half a star.
Sure. I guess I look at it, especially for an episode that's a 5. The way I describe it, which is also not necessarily a good description, or it's a very subjective thing, is like, how much do I want to rewatch the episode, and how much can I tolerate rewatching the episode, or crave rewatching it? And so there are a couple ones like The Defector, First Contact, Lower Decks. I can watch those over and over and over and over and over again and again. And it's just kind of funny because I think one of the things that you're gonna, I'm curious, like we have to talk another, a year from now, because I'm curious to know, once this book is out there and you're talking to people about it, the experiences that you're going to get with talking back and forth on, people are going to be like, you gave that one a 4, it should have been a 5, and, and all that. And did you experience that? Because you were blogging and tweeting some of this as you were watching it.
Yeah.
Did you experience any of that along the way?
Not a huge amount. A couple of people pulled me up on Yesteryear, most people's favorite episode of the animated series, and I was quite lucky that I do have, I think it's Una McCormack sticking up for Yesteryear, because I didn't quite get it, and I'd been hoping for more of that incredible Kirk, Spock, McCoy chemistry in the animated series, and I was frustrated in the second episode. It's all focused on Spock, and Kirk's not there once he goes back in time, and yes, I did appreciate the bittersweet ending. But I was kind of distracted by not having that chemistry there, and I think I maybe didn't give that episode its due. But no, it's not been too bad. And like I said, I think I've given myself a little bit of a shield by having these other reviews sprinkled through. Dan Starkey, who your listeners may know as the Sontaran Strax from the more recent iteration of Doctor Who, is a good friend, and he stuck up for, of all stories, Cat's Paw. Which, as far as I could tell, was just total nonsense. But he remembered watching it when he was 10 years old and thinking it was the most fun he'd ever had in his life. So, like I say, these are my thoughts, and that's all they are. And I make no claim that I've done anything other than try to help you understand how I got there, even if you wouldn't have got there, or you think I'm deranged for having got there. You can at least see what my thought process was.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. That's good.
So did you allocate a specific time during the day to watch the episode you chose to watch that particular day?
No, it was wherever I could fit it in, and I was watching them in strict release order. So there was no choose. It was whatever episode came up, and which meant, by the way, that once Deep Space Nine started, I was roughly alternating Deep Space Nine and Next Generation, and then alternating Deep Space Nine and Voyager. Because interleaving.
You were okay. So you were doing, even though they were released at the same time or intertwined.
Yeah,
you were watching
episodes in strict release order, exactly as you would have seen them, Steve, when you were watching in the 90s. No, I watched them whenever I had time. I first thing in the morning, last thing at night, over lunch, and then sometimes I would realize I had a busy week, or I was traveling, and I'd bank episodes. I'd watch 2 or 3 early, or sometimes I'd get behind and I'd have to catch up. So I set aside a weekend to watch I timed it so I had a weekend to watch the 4 movies because they came one after the other.
Right.
So I was able to watch those over a weekend, that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of play, a little bit of give. But the upshot was, on average, watching one episode a day.
And again, the episode is, 50 plus minutes in the 1960s, 40 plus minutes as the years go by. But did you, as you're watching, you say, okay, pause it, you make some notes, start it again, pause it, make some notes. Did you do that? Or did you just wait after?
I was making notes, but I rarely paused it unless I'd like missed something or misunderstood something. So it is possible I've just got something dead wrong because I was writing a note while some important line of dialogue was being said. I hope that's not happened. I don't think it has. But no, I just tried to scribble things down as I was watching and then type them up. I put up blog posts about every 5 or 6 days. That was an opportunity just to kind of get things in order. And then everything's been gone over and rewritten and condensed or expanded or streamlined. There's a difference between what I'm willing to chuck up on a blog for free and what I'm asking people to part with hard-earned cash for.
Well, I mean, as far as hard-earned cash, I mean, it is, a definitive thing that you've done. So really, you could go to the blog, but here you can actually have this hard-covered record of what one person did, which is rather interesting. There was a movie that came out a few years ago based on a story of a woman who cooked every day for 365 days something that Julia Childs had done. And it was a wonderful movie, as I remember seeing. But there was someone, again, who did the same thing, who was decided, I'm going to do this every day, cook one dish that she did. And it was uniquely amazing. You didn't have to cook, but you still had to commit to almost full 2 years to doing this project. Did anyone ever say, Tom, knock it off?
Yeah, my wife wasn't keen. She didn't really get behind the whole project, but I think she was a bit more excited when the book deal came along. That seemed to sort of legitimize it a bit.
That's really nice. That's good.
One of the things that's really interesting to me, so since you didn't watch, especially Next Generation in its original run, so I'm of the age when Next Generation came out, I was a teenager, and I watched that as it aired. And as I've gotten older and rewatched, it's interesting because watching certain episodes now, it's a different experience. And I think I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast in the past, especially with the Crushers, because when I was watching its original run, I identified closer to Wesley because I was closer to his age, where now I'm a mom and older. I'm older than Dr. Crusher was at that time. So I look at that a little bit differently. So, and that's what, one of the things that's interesting to me, since you're watching this recently, I wonder if you would have ever had, and there's no way to know, we can't go back, but I'm wondering, just like, would you have had the same impression if you had seen some of these episodes, at the time? And one that was struck me is your rating and review of The Outcast.
Oh, yeah.
Which was an episode that I loved. And one of the reasons why I loved it when it came out at the time was because that was when I was, I think, a senior in high school. I think I was a senior. And I was reading a lot of Ursula Le Guin, who she wrote a lot about different, cultures, androgynous cultures and stuff like that. And so to be kind of going through that experience and then like, oh my God, here, that's what they're, showing on the screen. I was just so like excited that they were doing that. And your review is interesting because it kind of pokes on how really throughout Next Generation, they did not do a good job of showing better gender things, which is really, kind of a more of a take on the culture of the 90s here in America than I think on anything else. But it's just, interesting because I'm wondering if you had watched that at the time, if you would have had a similar reaction to looking at it through the lens of, 2020.
What season is The Outcast?
It was season 5.
Yes, I almost said I didn't watch it at the time. I watched the first 3 seasons because BBC Two. Well, there's a funny story about that. I'll just tell you this very briefly, as I can't remember if this is in the book or not. But the BBC bought the first 3 seasons of Next Generation and started showing them weekly. And if you just pause for a second and think about season 3 of Next Generation, might dawn on you that there's a significant problem with this purchase, given that at that point there was no plan to buy season 4 or anything after, which is that season 3 ends with the best of both worlds.
Oh, yes. Talk about leaving you with a cliffhanger.
Yeah. Patrick Stewart tells a story of during the break between seasons, driving through LA and stopping his car in traffic and having the family in the next car over wind down the window and yell at him, "You have ruined our summer!" Because everyone was going crazy, not knowing what would happen. Because rumors were flying, maybe started by Paramount, who knows, that Patrick Stewart was going back to the stage and wouldn't be doing any more Star Trek. So there was people thought they might be writing him out for good. So somebody somewhere at Paramount or somewhere else just said to the BBC, "Why don't you take the first episode of season 4 as well?" So we only had to wait a week between Best of Both Worlds and Best of Both Worlds Part 2. But it was a while before we saw Family. So we did watch some of those episodes as they came out. But I was really struck by, there's a story that at a convention early in Next Gen, either when it had just started or just before it started, a fan asked Gene Roddenberry about putting gay characters on the Enterprise. And he said something to the effect of, "Yes, the time has come. We absolutely should be doing that." What happens next is he becomes too sick to take a regular part in actually producing the show. Power eventually goes to Rick Berman, and he is very risk averse. Putting gay characters on an American show in first run syndication is too big a risk, and he isn't prepared to do it. So there are kind of little half-hearted nods in the direction of gay representation until you get to Deep Space Nine and the character of Garak. And Andrew Robinson has said very clearly when he got the script. I think it's the second or third episode of Deep Space Nine, and he looked at the interactions that Garak has with Dr. Bashir. He said, "Well, I know exactly what Garak wants from Dr. Bashir, and it's carnal." And so that's what he played. And Alexander Siddig got the idea, and he played it back. And for about 3 years, both of them played all their scenes together as if they were flirting. And the writers began to pick up on the subtext, and they began writing that too. And then Rick Berman noticed. And lo and behold, suddenly Garak has a girlfriend, like a good red-blooded heterosexual Cardassian, and all that went away. But there's a delightful I think this was during lockdown, a bit of fan fiction which was performed at an online convention by Alexander Siddig and Andrew Robinson, which ends with Andrew Robinson saying, as Garak, "I have to go now. My husband's calling me." And the husband is Dr. Bashir, and that's just lovely. But there should have been gay characters on Star Trek before Discovery, and it kind of pisses me off that there weren't. So that may be why I gave that episode a hard time. I think I can't remember if it's that episode. Somewhere in the book, I say something to the effect of, "I'm happy for Star Trek episodes to be space adventure if that's all they're trying to do, and if they do that really well, that'll get 5 stars from me. That's no problem. But if you're going to tell a story with some kind of social message, then I think I get to judge the social message." And same with Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. I think I can't endorse what they're trying to say. And if you're trying to deliver a message with your art, then that becomes part of the thing that I'm going to assess and come to have opinions about.
Yeah. No, and I agree, but I think, we have to appreciate the fact that there are the people who are trying to tell a message with the art, and then there's the machine of the business that is they're butting heads. So the fact that they got any of that through, I think, is a testament to how much they wanted to and how much they tried. And I guess that's, what I'm, I guess to some degree appreciative of. I want to go back though and mention when you were talking about the gap between the seasons, you have the summer. Yes. And again, I remember that's the way TV used to be. That was, summer was the worst for TV because you were always waiting for the next thing. But I can tell you, like right now, I would give anything to go back and have only a single summer between TV show seasons. I mean, and I'm not just talking about Star Trek. I'm talking about anything.
Yeah.
The fact that like it's a year or 2 years between seasons of shows is just like.
And then you get 8 episodes, and it's gone again.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
frustrating.
Exactly.
We interviewed one of the writers from Strange New Worlds, Davey Perez, and the whole point is like from the end of the last episode of Strange New Worlds, we have to wait till 2025 before it. And they've already written all the scripts. They've gone through production. You think, well, they just get it done, get it out there. But no, it won't be until maybe, we have to wait another 6 to 8 to 10 months before we get to see the next one.
Anything to just have just a summer.
And then,
just the summer.
And then as you said, we only get 8 or 10 episodes where, Enterprise still gave you 26, when it was in its last run. So you had, you got a lot of episodes, and they weren't that long before the next season. So if you had a cliffhanger, you didn't have to wait that long to get the payoff from it or something like that. But now it's amazing.
It's bad for writers too. It used to be if you were staffed on a show like Star Trek, you'd spend it would take you 42 weeks to knock out those 20 to 25 episodes, and then you'd have a few months off, then you'd be right back there. But someone like your guest is only going to be in work for 3 months, working on a season of Star Trek, and then you've got to find another gig. It makes it hard to recruit talent, and it makes it hard to make a living as a writer.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And keep consistency, because if those writers go do something else, there's no guarantee they're coming back to that, because there's a lot of things that feel very broken.
I know, and that's the problem of modern television, is that we don't have. The networks still are giving you 15 to 20 episodes of a series, and you only have to wait till the next summer to watch it. But even that has been extended out. Then sometimes the next season starts.
No shortage of Young Sheldon or NCIS.
Yes. Yeah. Don't mention that. My wife loves NCIS Hawaii, and they just canceled it, and they had a cliffhanger at the end of the episode. She's like, "No, why? No, that's one of my favorite shows." But you're left
never watched
with
a single episode of NCIS.
Oh, okay.
Just aware it's a show that exists.
Yeah.
But anyway, so okay. Here's a simple question. Of watching all the series and so on, is there one character that you like the best? In all of this, and there's so many characters and so many, main characters, supporting characters, occasional characters. Is there one that you like? Yeah, that's the one I enjoy watching the most.
I think I'm going to say 7 of 9.
Because?
Because there are 2 versions of Star Trek Voyager. One that's pretty bad, one that's pretty good. And the difference is Jerry Ryan is 7 of 9. She just lights that show up when she turns up. And I can't think of any other character, possibly with the exception of Spock in the original series, but you haven't got a Spockless version of the show to compare it to. But I can't think of any other character who just turns a show around the way that she does. There's decent stuff in earlier episodes of Voyager, but it's a long old wait until Jerry Ryan shows up, and then she is just phenomenal. What she does with that part is extraordinary.
I was gonna say, so does that, the love for 7 of 9, does that include into Picard?
Oh yeah, I was delighted to see her back again. In fact, it was funny because watching the early seasons of Picard before I'd done this, I only had kind of vague recollections of who she was, and I roughly remembered her backstory. But then by the time season 3 of Picard came around, I'd finished watching Voyager, and so then my appreciation for her grew even more.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's an extraordinary bit of casting.
There's one scene in one episode of the second season of Picard where she appears in a park. She appears and the little girl looks up and says, "Are you a superhero?" And 7-9 just goes, makes a little, and then walks away. And felt like, what a beautiful scene, what a beautiful scene. And then, of course, we're all like going, yes, would you please give us a series with Seven of Nine, Raffi, and
I'd
go
watch it.
on
Star
to
Trek Legacy. Yep.
Legacy.
We want
Would you give
Legacy.
us something like that? Because it would be such a great show. Because,
And
like
give
you
us 20
said,
episodes.
yes, please. Well, they would, but it would be over 2 seasons and over 4 years. That would be the wrong problem. But yeah, but still, there's an example of where, her character has just evolved, and from where she was in Voyager to where she was in Picard, and super well done all the way around. Yeah, you're right. We had on our show, we had Phyllis Strong, who was a scriptwriter for okay, so you know who she is. And we talked about the one episode that she did where she switched bodies with the Doctor.
That's delightful.
It's absolutely. And she had so much fun, Jerry Ryan playing Robert Picardo. And it's just that shows her depth of quality as an actress, where she just, for a lot of boys, it's like, wow, I could watch that all day long.
Yes.
There are a lot of girls who think the same thing too.
Mhm.
I mean, yes.
And there's no shortage of babes in skin tight spandex on Star Trek, but there's something a bit special about Jerry Ryan, and there's this kind of arc of Star Trek baddies, and done well, it can be great, but it can get a little bit tropey if you're not careful. But the pattern goes something like this: generic, indistinguishable bad guys, one who stands out from the crowd, and is our ally. They're all different.
Mhm.
So you can see that happening with Klingons, you can see it happening with Ferengi, and who'd have thought you would see it happening with Borg? But of course, as far back as Iborg in Next Generation, you can see it starting. And then to have a Borg crew member is amazing, and that is a well that they mine so extensively, and maybe by the 7th season have started overmining. But it's an incredibly rich seam. Well, the problem with Voyager is that it's the human characters are also dull, and so they keep falling back on the Doctor and Seven of Nine, and they have a brilliant performer in Roxanne Dawson, and they almost never give her anything to do. It's so frustrating.
It's very interesting, and you're right. You're right about that. And again, the show had some really great. Had to have villains all the way through, And again, to me, Captain, what's her name? Varric from the 3rd season of Picard. Amanda, who
Amanda
played
Plummer,
that?
yeah.
Amanda Plummer, thank you.
Yeah.
And truly the greatest going away line of all time is she's ejected out of it. We won't use those words, but we all know what she said. And it was a great line. And again, that's where you have these villains that are interesting and you like them. Or, as we did where we discussed about David Warner playing the baddie against Picard, and the whole thing about the 3 or 4 or 5 lights. You sit there and you
which
go,
is a steal from George Orwell, but it's a brilliant use of it.
Yes, exactly. But again, you watch this. He's a bad guy, but you admire him, or you like him, or even going back to Space Seed, and you watch Khan, you're going, this guy's interesting. There's something about him. We like him, even though he's the bad guy. And
you
that's
guys must know the story about David Warner and Chain of Command.
No, please share.
He was a last-minute replacement for another actor.
No, I did not know that.
Which meant he didn't have time to learn any of the dialogue.
Huh.
He's giving that performance, reading virtually every single line off cue cards like he's on an episode of Saturday Night Live. Now, you have to be a really good actor to come in and give that level of performance opposite Patrick Stewart, but you are approaching genius level to come in and give that performance with essentially zero preparation.
Wow.
I gotta go back and watch that with that piece of knowledge.
Oh, it's amazing. He was such a good actor. He's such a loss.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. In everything that he did, in all the episodes, from being, Bob Cratchit in Christmas Carol to playing Jack the Ripper in Time After Time. I mean, the man had tremendous scale of his acting ability. And yes,
I
you're
first saw
right.
him as the embodiment of evil in Time Bandits, and he is so funny in that film.
Oh, that is you've seen that one, of Dina. You know that really well.
Long time. It's been a while.
Oh,
that might be a good rewatch at some point in the near future.
We have to do an episode of Time Bandits. It's sheer genius. Yes, where God is who was the British
Ralph
actor?
Richardson as God.
Yes.
As a sort of slightly dandruffy headmaster.
Exactly. We're going off on tangents. We love it on this show.
That's what we always do.
Yes, we always do. We get going on talking about one thing and we lead to another, and so on and so forth.
There's this optimism and this open-heartedness about Star Trek that really marks it out, and it goes all the way back at least as far as Devil in the Dark, which is one of my absolute favorite episodes of the original series. And it's brilliant in a number of ways. I think it's some wonderful Kirk and Spock material in that.
I have a little plush.
The idea that
the little Horta.
Yep. The idea that the savage monster that's disintegrating all these innocent miners is the aggrieved party that needs to be protected is phenomenal for American network television in 1966. Come on, people, this is fantastic.
And then with McCoy going, I think I can heal the dead. He's got the silicon he's putting in there, patching the wound, and they're
doctor, not a bricklayer.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
And then, of course, it turns out, the miners realize we're the bad guys.
Yeah.
And then they
it's stunning stuff.
Join forces together. That's the beauty of the show, is that sometimes, yes, in Star Trek, it would be in the last 10 minutes, they would solve all the problems pretty quick through something simple or something unbelievable. But that was the trademark of the show. And there's an example of that one as well. But yeah, you're right. There was, and I think that's what it was. Cause again, growing up in the 60s, late 60s, what was going on in the United States between Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy being killed, the Vietnam War, all these things going on. You had political strife. You had the riots of the Democratic Convention, 1968, but then you had Star Trek. And it was like this voice of optimism where it wasn't about financial gain. It wasn't about political gain. It was about seeking out new life and new civilization. And my goodness, that was really optimism that was missing from television at that time. Yeah, you're right. Any other questions, Adina?
I don't think so. But this is, an interesting book to have at your side while you're watching the show. Watch an episode and then go and see what Tom, rated and said, and then
see if you agree with me. See if you disagree with me. It's all fine. But like I said, I hope my little reviews are entertaining to read. I hope I've been clear about how I reach my conclusions, and I'm very happy for you to read the book going, well, this is exactly what I think, and the man is clearly a genius. Or I couldn't disagree more. But I'm happy to have the debate in my mind. Both of those are absolutely fine by me.
And what's really cute is because you are British, you use terms and words that are not common or not American phrases, which I love. I think
jumped out at you?
Moppet. When you refer to little kids as moppets.
Little children.
Moppets, yes.
Yes. That is,
I'm slightly allergic to moppets.
Yep, I feel like I've heard that term maybe in a Monty Python episode or something like that, but it is not a common term for little kids. We might call them munchkins or something if we're,
or you say kiddo, little kiddos. Mm-hmm.
Kiddos, munchkins, younglings. There's all kinds of, we have our cute ways of doing it. Moppet is not one. So I think it's super cute that you do things so that one, especially because I have 2 Moppets of my own, it stuck out at me.
And I think my last question I wrote down here is, what's your favorite beer?
Having nothing to do with the Fast and the Furious, I do frequently order a Corona, just because it's a kind of crispy beer that it goes down easily.
It's refreshing.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say I went to England for the first time in 2019, went to a British pub, ordered a Guinness, and realized just how much better it is there than it is here. Maybe it
I'm sure
was
that's
because
true.
I was in a pub in England and enjoying a cold Guinness, but yeah, that was
Well,
special.
Irish
as a
people will tell
point,
you it's even better in Ireland than it is in England.
yeah, as a point of note, I learned when I was in Germany a bunch of years ago, the beer that they export is not the same beer that they sell locally. It really is not.
Mhm.
So we were at Beck's, where they make Beck's, and it was so delicious. It's not something I drink here, but there it was just so delicious, and that's where I learned what they sell locally. It's not the same as what they export here. So I believe that your Guinness experience is probably something similar. Like you had a
Yeah.
different Guinness
Yeah.
than you would get here.
And
That's what I've
yep.
been. Yeah, that's been told that what we get here in the States is the leftovers.
Yes.
But that's okay. I still like it here as a leftover as well. So there you go. Um, well, with that in mind, then I guess I can close by saying there you have it, folks. Tom has shared with us his insights into the amazing endeavor of his. He is not crazy, nor do you suffer from OCD. He just did what we all love to do. He watched Star Trek and he enjoyed it. If this has piqued your interest, please go and buy his book. Tom was gracious enough to share a digital copy with us so we could prepare for this. And I know I'm going to buy a copy of his book from my collection. And as always, we are so grateful to be part of the Trek Geeks network of podcasts. If you have enjoyed this episode, please go to our Facebook, our Instagram pages, or whatever platform you are using to listen to these recordings and share your ratings. 5 stars, please, like Tom assigned to All Good Things, and not what he gave to Spock's brain. You can even send us an email at thebigsci-fi podcast@gmail.com if that is best for you. And as always, I leave you with these parting words. Look to the skies, live long and prosper.
Thank you so much, guys. Books make great presents.
They do.